Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to today's webinar, which is brought to you by Shared Services Link in association with Pagero. Today we're looking at navigating your AP journey. We're zeroing in on tips, strategies, and insights. My name is Susie West. I'm the founder and CEO at Shared Services Link, and I'm delighted to be introducing a very strong panel today of speakers. So we have Bryan DeGraw, who's Associate Principal at the Hackett Group, Eric Modh, who is Managing Director North America at Pagero, and Heather Bates, who is AP Automation Expert at Pagero as well. You have a key role to play as ever, which is to make sure you get the most out of your time. Please put your questions through, text them through to me, and I'll put them to our speakers in the last 10 minutes or so of this webinar. So what are we going to be focusing on today? Well, it's two huge steps that you would take in your accounts payable journey. So your accounts payable improvement journey, automation journey. Number one, we're going to be zeroing in a lot on business case build, how to actually build a business case that you can trust, that other people have credibility in, that gets everybody excited. And number two, we're going to be talking about some of the technology choices that you might want to seriously consider, some potentially more than others within your AP automation journey. Things to look out for. So Bryan is going to be walking you through an excellent framework, a great model for you to take on board and apply for you to use when building a business case. So my view is, if you follow this methodology, I'm pretty sure that you can be confident that you've covered all your bases as far as your business case build is concerned. So that's a very exciting session that we've got in the first half of this webinar. We then have Eric, who will cover off a couple of slides initially introducing Bryan, but then he's going to be talking after Bryan about the pros and cons of different technologies that you might want to be considering within your AP stack. We're focusing mainly on AP data ingestion. This is the thing that's really confounded a lot of companies, enterprise organizations. So how do you really move that to touchless as much as possible? So we'll be focusing on the pros and cons of different technologies to help you with your AP data ingestion. And we'll be zeroing in on the importance and value of working with a network. And Heather Bates will be pulling all of this information together and illustrating how it's done in practice. She'll be walking us through 2 case studies and reminding us of a few really important considerations that we try and have baked into our long-term memory when taking all of these learnings forward. So just before I introduce and hand over to our first speaker, I'd just like to do our first poll question. We've got 3 poll questions today. So let's kick off with our first poll question, which is, what are your top goals within accounts payable for the next 1 to 3 years? Please select all that apply. Would you say it's mainly around eliminating manual work, moving to touchless? Is it around increasing document processing per FT, so looking hard at improving your productivity? Is it improving your cash flow management? Improving supplier relationship metrics? Or maybe it's something else. So what are your top goals for the next 1 to 3 years? Please select all that apply. We've got about 60% of you responding, so I'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results. Thanks a lot. We're at 63% of you responding there. A real winner there, with 86% of you talking about eliminating manual work, moving to touchless. It's a massive talking point for a lot of shared services organizations today. In second place, just under 50% of you talking about better cash flow management. Third place, 38% of you talking about increased document processing per FTE, so improving productivity. Fourth place, improving supplier relationship metrics. So thank you, that was very interesting. And now over to Eric, please.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you for that introduction. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to present here with the Shared Services Link. as Susie said, my name is Eric Modh. I am the managing director for Pagero in the United States. I've been in the industry for the better part of 13, 14 years or so. Also, I want to start by thanking all the attendees for tuning in. Hopefully, Pagero, together with Hackett, will be able to share some valuable insights as it relates to how top companies are navigating throughout their accounts payable journey, and also how to build a business case. So with that, let's jump straight into the agenda. I will do a brief introduction of who Pagero is, and then I will hand it over to Bryan that will do the same on behalf of Hackett. He will also be sharing some insights into how to build a proper business case. As the poll question said, right, or the result of the poll question, what most companies are looking for is to automate their accounts payable process and get away from manual work. So I'm going to go into some of the technologies and methodologies available with a heavy focus on the ingestion piece there, as Susie mentioned in the beginning. And last but not least, then Heather will kind of try to tie everything together and share some insights to what other companies have done to achieve their goals and objectives within their AP journey, and then also finish off with some key considerations. So we got a good agenda here, so let's jump right into it. Starting with, for those of you who don't know Pagero, we are a leading provider in electronic business-to-business communication, both from a purchase-to-pay and from an order-to-cash standpoint, so both sides of the house. We're helping organizations all over the world to truly automate and digitize the exchange of invoices, purchase orders, and other related messages in between. And for that, we're building the world's largest open smart business network, really enabling companies to communicate with your trading partners, regardless of where they are in the world, regardless of system, regardless of volume, and industry. We got our start in the Scandinavian region 20 plus years ago, and since then we have grown to become a true global provider with offices in more than 30 countries, spanning across 6 continents, and we're serving customers in about 140 countries today. And the way we've been able to grow truly validates that digital transformation isn't just a buzzword anymore. It is happening everywhere, and it's happening fast. As the result of the poll question said, I know that many in the audience are searching for ways to improve and automate accounts payable, or maybe even the full purchase-to-pay process. And I think a good way of starting is obviously looking at that business case and how to build out that business case. So with that said, I would like to transition over to Bryan over at Hackett. And he will be spending some time talking about key considerations when building out and creating that business case. So stage is yours, Bryan.
Great, thanks, Eric. So before I get into the business case, just want to quickly share who Hackett is. I expect many of you know the Hackett Group, and we're best known for benchmarking. We've been doing benchmarking of back office processes for the past 30 years. So looking at finance, procurement, HR, and IT. And then we take that data, and that's what we use to inform our guidance, guide organizations to make their process improvements. So again, you can see on the slide here our experience and the depth and breadth of our database. And again, we take that data and identify top performing digital world-class organizations, and then help others understand how to make that journey. What are their gaps in their processes? What are their gaps in their best practice utilization? And of course, you can appreciate it's a holistic look at a service delivery model of organization, policy, process, partners, and of course, technology. And of course, that's a big focus. Number one, everyone wants to eliminate manual work, and the only way to do that is to digitize. So a little bit about the Hackett Group there. And now let's talk about what is a business case. And I know I expect everyone has been involved in a business case at some part of your career. You may have been someone who led the entire process, but certainly we've all been indirectly involved in providing data to a business case. And so what is a business case? Obviously, it's a tool that you want to use to understand what is going to be the financial impact and also non-financial impact of making a change in your organization. Again, it could be organizational change, it could be technology change. And of course, we're focused today on automating the P2P process. And so we're going to talk a lot about how a business case applies to that. It obviously informs your decision process, okay? To really say, okay, how is this change going to positively improve the business, okay? But again, a business case sometimes it's similar to a hypothesis, right? So, when do you write it? You write a business case, create a business case when you're in a planning stage of a change in your organization. And you want that business case to guide you in terms of what is the true opportunity, justify this choice you're making around strategic direction change. Of course, why you write it, it's really the backbone for your guidance, right? It's explaining the reasons for the change. It's enabling the change with very specific guidance around what is expected in terms of improvements to the business. And we all, the word change has a lot of, gets a lot of focus. Change is good. If you're not changing, you're not improving. Unfortunately, the business case doesn't get the same, accolades, but a business case is critical and super important to have. So again, I'm going to be talking about Hackett's approach, an each-step approach to creating a business case. But first, I'm going to ask Susie to bring up a polling question for us to get an idea of, on today's webcast, how confident are you about your business case?
Thanks, Bryan. That's great. So how confident are you in your organization's ability to build an effective business case today? Are you very confident, somewhat confident, not very confident, and maybe it's not applicable? So how confident are you in your organization's ability to build an effective business case today that people believe in, they trust, there's credibility there, it's watertight, etc.? Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results. So a little bit of a bell curve going on here. 33% of you saying very confident, half of you saying somewhat confident, 13% of you saying not really that confident at all. So interesting mix. Thank you. And back to you, please, Bryan.
Yes. Okay. So let's look at the 8 steps of building a business case. And for those of you who are very confident, I'm hoping this is similar to yours. You may have more steps, fewer steps, but I expect that you cover off in your business plan approach all these key factors. So we're going to look at determining the approach and of course, why are you doing a business case? You want to identify desired outcomes. You need to create your baselines, what your scenarios are, what's going to be the scope and timing. So step 2 is, what are the assumptions? What is the scope of this change you're making, this implementation? What are the financials, baseline financials, of course, the timing, the business drivers? The third step is looking at benefits, okay? Is this going to increase, have an opportunity to increase your sales and revenues? Is it going to have a cost reduction and maybe a combination of both? Is it going to increase your working capital efficiency? And then, of course, there's intangibles. So we're going to talk about, the hard benefits and soft benefits. Then you want to make sure that you identify all the costs that are going to be associated with this project. Operating expenses, capital expenditures. You're going to look at and calculate your financial impact. So again, your very traditional financial metrics around net present value, your expected time of payback, your internal rate of return. You'll have those very traditional hard financial figures as part of your business case. Then a very important step, number 6, is doing your sensitivity and your risk analysis. So looking back on those assumptions that you developed in step 2 and the benefits that you expect to achieve, now you start doing what-if scenarios and create some ranges of opportunity. And this is a super important step because you want to be realistic. You're going to hear me say be realistic multiple times today. The 7th step is determining non-financial impact, okay? Is this going to make an improvement to supplier relationships? Is it going to impact customer experience, employee experience? And then of course you want to summarize it all together. What is the conclusion and what is the recommendations? And again, appreciate that sometimes a business case similar to a hypothesis proves out that we need to take a different direction, or maybe this is not the right thing, or it makes you go back and sharpen the pencil and say, and again, not go back just to change things to make it look better, but go back and sharpen the pencil and say, let's relook at our assumptions. Are they realistic in order to make the right conclusion and recommendations? So we're going to start with step number 1, okay? Determining your approach. And again, like I said, similar to creating a hypothesis, following the scientific method, very similar approach. Again, what you're looking to do is create a justification, a rational methodology and determination about the change that you want to make. What's really important in this step is you're looking at the timing of your benefits, and you want to be realistic about that. Certainly, we all want to immediately achieve results. Okay, I think that's kind of our culture these days. Even in our individual everyday lives, we expect instant gratification. Well, sometimes you have to be realistic and know that change is good, but sometimes the wheels move slow. So you want to be realistic about the timing of the benefits. When are the costs going to occur? Some are going to come very quickly, some may be slower. Same thing with your assumptions around revenue growth. It may not happen immediately. So again, realistic baseline. That's really super important, is create a realistic point of view of where you are today and what the impact of initiatives are that are even in flight. Sometimes organizations, we're probably all a bit guilty of this, is taking credit for things that are already happening and building it into the business case when those benefits were going to happen anyway. So you really want to focus on realistic point of view and baseline. Now, the second step is going to be developing your assumptions, as I mentioned. So your assumptions that you're creating are going to be looking at the timing, so the time period that is part of the business case analysis. Geographically, where are you making this change? Is it just in one region? Is it just in one business unit? So you're defining specifically as part of your business case what's going to be impacted within your organization, the timing of when it's going to be impacted, and then again, what parts of the business. And again, sometimes your business case will have multiple layers, right? If you are planning to do a change in implementation that eventually will be global, it's a really good approach to do these steps by region and by by your phase implementation. So you're being another layer down of realistic. You may not achieve the same benefits and you may not have the same assumptions region by region. So it's really good to have this broken down by your planned approach of implementation. The third step is determining benefits, okay? And this one, again, the guidance here is always going to be realistic, right? This is now we're getting into more of the exciting parts, because this is like what we're going to achieve. We get excited about this, but we have to keep staying grounded. So is there going to be an increase of sales? And or if we're looking at spend control, is there going to be a reduction in spend for the organization? How is the project going to affect cost improvements, whether it's cost of goods or expenses to the organization? What is the realistic figures? Of course, what we're starting right now is we're just gathering what do we believe the sources of those benefits are going to be. Is this going to help revenue? Is it going to reduce spend? Is it going to, of course, affect things like working capital? And again, number 2 on our list of focus right after eliminate manual work, everyone said we're also looking at cash flow, right? So it's very important to understand, is this going to improve our working capital? And of course, that is a big factor when organizations are looking at accounts payable solutions, is that it's going to give us much better control and visibility about our disbursements and our outgoing cash. So we're going to stay on number 3 and keep talking more about determining your benefits. So those are the 3 key areas. Now we're going to dig down even a little more. cost reduction can be viewed in two perspectives, and I expect many of you on today's call are focused on the accounts payable process, procurement process. There's always two key areas that procurement looks at, and that's your hard savings, your expense reduction. So, for example, you've renegotiated a contract, and you've got more favorable pricing in that contract. That's going to be a hard savings. That's an expense reduction that you can take to the bank. The other one is softer savings, which is a cost avoidance. But equally important to highlight, if you're a procurement professional working with suppliers, or again, when you're looking at a business case and what do you expect a benefit to be, there could be a cost avoidance. So you want to also factor in that component. Both types of those costs are important to include. And what's really important is to be able to define it, to be able to explain it, because you must get buy-in. When I sum up towards the end, this is a cross-functional exercise where you need to get buy-in from senior leadership and of course key stakeholders that are part of the organization, the region, the process that this change is going to affect. You need to get the buy-in, and if you can't clearly define and explain what you've put into the business case, it's very challenging to get that buy-in, or worst cases, at the end of it, you don't have people that are shaking their head in the same way and saying this is a good change, because they weren't part of the development of your business case. Data sources. So of course, the greatest source of information is going to be within your organization. How has this process operated and been measured in the past? So hopefully, and we're going to talk about measurement, hopefully you've got some good data around the process, the function that you're making a change to look at that historical performance. Of course, the other area to look at is externally. How do we compare to others? There's lots of ways, not just Hackett, but many others that you can go to gather some external benchmarking data to say, here's where we are today, here's where we want to get to, is this realistic? So looking internal as well as external is super important. So step number 4 is now the cost. We've looked at all the benefits, we're excited about what we are hoping to get. Now we need to also be realistic about what is this really going to cost us, okay? Because at the end of the day, no different than managing our own home expenses in checkbook, we can get excited about something, but then we have to realize that there's costs associated with it, right? So if we get a fancy new toy, it's great to be playing with a toy, but then all of a sudden the next month a bill comes in the mail. We got to be ready and realistic about that. So you need to look at your cost types, hard and software perspective. So is this, obviously we're talking technology. There's going to be costs associated with the upfront installation. There's going to be maintenance costs potentially as well. We need to understand the structure of how the expense of the software will occur, have it included in here realistically, talk about our timeline. So it should look not just as when we turn on the switch, but long-term, is the cost going to stay aligned with the benefits? Will the benefits continue to exceed? We need to look at internal labor costs, external, all the costs associated with, if we're bringing in partners, third parties, that needs to be included. The one that I probably on the slide should have made in a bigger font and bright is training. Training before, during, and after, change management before, during, and after. So that is an expense that you need to consider, and a cost that you really want to make sure you're doing your change management focus. And that's going to drive adoption of your change, and it also factors in, of course, into those expected benefits. Because if you're not getting the adoption, the change, you're not going to see the expected benefits that you would put into your business case. Step number 5, this is where anyone on the line who is a CPA, a CMA, someone who really enjoys looking at P&Ls and balance sheets, this is your section, right? You definitely have to have the financial model looked at, and it's got to align with what the baseline is today and what your scenarios are. And of course, we're showing just one. You may have multiple scenarios depending on what you expect the variability to be of your assumptions that you've created. So again, traditional things that we would expect to see in here. You're going to look at, you have your net present value, your payback period, your internal rate of return, all those things are going to be expected to be part of this. And again, cash flows, really understanding cash flows. So, you know, we can look at, you know, balance sheets and P&Ls, those are super important. But I think, I'm not sure who coined the phrase, but, you know, you can run a business at a loss for a while, but you can only run out of cash one time, right? So you got to make sure your cash flows are aligned. And again, realistic in terms of what you expect your cash inflows and outflows to be relative to your business case and your change. Number 6, I mentioned early on, step number 6 is a super important one. It's, I would say it's one that needs more time spent on it. Not enough scenarios and playing with the business case is typically done. Unfortunately, sometimes it's done at the end when it should have been done sooner. But this is where you're going to spend time looking at your assumptions you've made, how those assumptions relate to your benefits and your costs, and do some what if and sensitivity analysis. And you know, I couldn't think of a better way to say it, but you don't want to assume that your assumptions won't change. Okay, so you want to test them all. And you know, even a small one that you think isn't going to have a big effect, if it changes, it may have a great effect. So you really want to play with every one of them and do a what if, you know, and you know what's reasonable in terms of an expectation of something changing internally or externally. Will costs go up by X%? Will you get pressure on your pricing in the market by X%? And so, you know, expected improvement to revenue isn't going to be as great. What does that mean to the business case? So play with all of those assumptions that you've created and flow it through to see how it's going to affect the benefits and the costs that you've built into your case. And number 7 is determining non-financial impacts. Okay, so of course this is the area that gets my finance and accounting colleagues less excited, but still super important. And more organizations are looking at the element of experience. Okay? Hackett traditionally has always looked at efficiency and effectiveness as a measurement of digital world class. We also now look at experience. That's part of our model for determining performance. And so the change you're making, how is it going to affect customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction? Is it going to improve data accuracy? More and more organizations are very focused on master data management and understanding how a change you're making, especially in technology, is it going to drive faster, more accurate data to the business that's of course then used for analytics, for reporting, for decision making. So that data accuracy, non-financial impact, but a super important one to factor into your business case. And again, this is going to be informing your conclusions and your recommendations, and it's going to be observed. You want to look at it and measure it. And I'm about to talk in a moment about measurement and a balanced scorecard. And a balanced scorecard, of course, has both financial metrics and non-financial operational metrics in it. And so again, the final step in your process in the business case is summarizing your findings. You want to tie them back to the overall purpose of the business case. So again, it's almost like, you know, I mentioned hypothesis. It's almost like creating, if some of you have gone through the process of writing a thesis paper, it's that thorough. And many of you said that you're very confident around your process. So I'm expecting many of you take it all the way through this to the end, where you're summarizing the findings. And sometimes it doesn't prove out, right? And a good business case, a realistic business case, sometimes is not as attractive as you hoped, and if you're being realistic. So you really want to always be sharpening that pencil, making sure it's accurate. What is changing? Because again, sometimes the business case process takes on a life of its own. And I'm going to talk in a minute about some things. You want to keep it simple, but you want to make sure the business case is aligned with its purpose of looking at a change and proving out, is that change effective? And the business case carries on, right? The business case doesn't get put in the drawer. You continue to look at it and say, okay, now we're actually in implementation. How is the activities happening, the costs, the changes in benefits, how is that comparing back to our business case? So that's super important. Use that sensitivity and risk analysis to create the recommendations, but then you're also going to use that ongoing as you move into implementation. So summarizing the critical success factors. I mentioned earlier about having stakeholder involvement, support, buy-in. So super important. This is a cross-functional approach. You want to have a business case advisory board, so people that are invested in this. You know, as I mentioned, you may be going to some people with just a request for data. It's important that they know, you know, why are you asking for it? So of course, for two reasons, right? So they know there's potential for change and improvement in a process they're involved in, but you also want to make sure they're giving you good data, right? You want to make sure that, hey, you know, I want to see some key metrics around our past cycle times, our past matching rates, our on-time payment rates, because I'm building a business case. I want to see if the change we're considering is going to have a positive effect around those key metrics. So you want to get good data and have buy-in from the people that are going to be affected by the change. The content and structure, you want to have a focus on cash flow, as mentioned. Number two that everyone's focused on, super important to align the timing of the costs and the benefits and to continue to look back at that. Benefits, again, hard savings, soft savings, tangible and intangible benefits and effects you want to be looking at. Make it simple. Don't turn your business case process into just a project of its own, right? You should be focused on creating a conclusion and a set of recommendations to then move on. So sometimes business cases go on for far too long, right? So that's important to consider as well. And that what if scenario, can't say enough about doing the sensitivity and being realistic about what you expect, not only improvements to be, but what if you don't achieve certain levels, build that into your sensitivity. So now I want to talk about metrics and a management framework. The reason I want to talk about this is because it's really foundational to a business case. If your organization isn't measuring things today, before you really can do a lot of the steps that I talked about, you need this critical data. So process metrics are critical input to your business case. And of course, even if you're not in a position today where you're looking at a change, you still need to know what your performance is, right? How do you compare? Is there areas to make improvements? So if you're not measuring, you really can't even tell if there's an opportunity for improvement. So the reason for a management framework is to have that clear linkage of measures to a strategy, right? So if your goal is to have better spend control, your goal, obviously everyone's goal is good cost management. You have to have that framework for how you're measuring that. And so that framework is balanced, okay? A good balanced scorecard has both financial as well as operational metrics. So yes, you're gonna have, in the area of accounts payable, you're gonna know staffing and cost per unit, cost of the overall team, and you're gonna look at that. For comparison purposes, you'll look at your process costs of AP as a % of spend, so you can compare that externally. But you really need to know how are we doing from a financial perspective, but then of course operational, and how do they relate, and what's driving certain points of pain in a process, and how can that be improved? And of course, again, eliminating manual work. So I think the best thing is to look at the next slide and talk about what the difference is there. So if you're very manual, you're going to be, we picked a nice word, you're going to be a traditional organization in P2P. It's less mature, right? You're going to be have a lot of manual activities. You're not going to be automated. You're going to have a lot of perceived control. So perceived control is, hey, we do everything on a three-way match. We require approvals on everything because we're very manual, and there's no way to control it otherwise. So there's a perceived control. What is the relationship to a traditional organization with financial metrics? our data proves it out, they're going to have more staff, they're going to cost more, their cost per units are going to be more, their cost per spend is going to be more, okay? So as you advance here and you start to learn about best practices, you're comparing, you're improving, you're advancing your processes in P2P towards being a top performer, one of the cornerstones is very automated. So you've eliminated a lot of manual work. The work has actually shifted away from transactional to more knowledge-based and controls, but the controls, of course, are not all through a match. It's controls around what is our buy and pay strategy from an end-to-end perspective. And you've created a culture, an environment of process improvement, process management. You're measuring those metrics that were hard to find when you were creating a business case. They're available all the time, probably online on a dashboard. So that's what a top performer looks like. And holistically, okay, again, what measures, what gets measured is not only what matters, but it also drives behavior. It influences behavior. And you want to have that cascaded dashboard of measures from top level. So your stakeholders, your senior leaders in your organization have a quick snapshot of how are we looking at a cost level? How are we looking at a staffing level? Things that usually get a spotlight shined on them when you're doing annual business planning and budgeting. And of course, again, critical input into a business case, okay? Because we're always looking to improve those. And how do we compare? How does it compare to last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? How does it compare externally? But as you can see, you want to be able to cascade your set of metrics all the way down to the transactional level and what's important and how do we measure our teams that are doing the sourcing activity, the buying activity, the paying activity, okay? And holistically have an end-to-end process with measures from start to end and understand what influences them, right? Does a policy change influence it? Does a change in process influence it? And of course, one of the greatest opportunities is how does digital tools influence it? So hopefully this was informative. And again, for everyone who has a good process, hopefully it is a validation. You were checking boxes and say, yeah, we got it covered. For some of you who are still saying there's opportunity in your business case, hopefully you took away some points that you can add to yours. So I'm going to hand it back to Eric now.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you for sharing all of that. For sure, very interesting and great information. And I really like what you said about the importance of data and driving automation within your business, and allowing that will enables you to start measuring things, right? And this can be a struggle for many companies, and it is often due to lack of connectivity between you as a buyer and your trading partners. So now when we know more about how to build a business case, the next step would be to look at some of the technologies that are out there and how technology can help your organization to reach its goals and objectives. So companies are investing millions into your ERP processes and into digital transformation within your business, if you will. So the finance system speaks with the CRM, the logistics system speaks with the warehouse system, procurement speaks with AP, etc. But as soon as you add trading partners to the mix, a lot becomes analog, right? So one of the key aspects of transforming your accounts payable is related to how do we get that data into our systems from our vendors? How do we ingest data and at the same time ensure that it's accurate and complete? So I wanted to go through one by one some different technologies as to what I'm seeing in the market, and technologies that are used to ingest data into your ERP or workflow processes. Starting from the top with OCR. OCR was introduced back in the 1970s, so I bet a lot of you guys have had some kind of experience with this type of technology, and it's really used to interpret and convert data from a paper or from a PDF into a digital file format that can be consumed by your ERP or workflow. Looking at some of the pros, I mean, it's obviously cheaper and faster than manually entering in documents as you may be doing today. And it's really seen as the first step towards digitization. And it does work for some companies for sure. It sort of depends what your goals and objectives are. And even though it has improved over the years, it is still a fairly antiquated technology and far from perfect. You are not going to see 100% accuracy nor a consistent result. So OCR systems, they can be fairly expensive and time consuming to implement. Then you will not get away from that manual effort completely, since you will have to verify and check that all the information has been captured in the correct way. So we still need people to do that. But it is definitely an option and does have some pros and some cons for sure. Let's move over to the next one, which is RPA. And this really means that you'd implement bots to perform repetitive tasks otherwise done by people. So you can truly boost productivity across your organization. Instead of having people spending time on the same task over and over again, you can automate that by implementing RPA. That will do it for you. So RPA can, be beneficial if you build it to the maximum output and then scale down and then back up from there. It can, however, be somewhat of a guessing game to get everything correct. And while RPA may work great within some processes within your organization, I still haven't seen a fully successful RPA project as it relates to accounts payable and ingestion of invoice data. And I believe that some of the reasons for this is that if something goes wrong, it is very hard to fix the problem, and it does require a lot of programming. And it is not very, very smart. So it will do exactly what you tell the system to do. So the slightest change, it will generate errors. So from an AP standpoint, I would not say that RPA is the way to go. At least I haven't personally seen a great result from it. And then we have AI. Obviously, the next big thing, we hear about AI all the time, right? And it's almost scary. At least I think so. And a lot of technologies are incorporating AI more and more. And AI is used for things like otherwise would require human intelligence. But the question really is, can it be used for ingesting supplier invoice data? I would say yes and no. Maybe not as a standalone technology, but combining AI with other technologies, then absolutely. So you will see a reduction in human error, of course, with the appropriate coding. It will deliver a very consistent result. And this can be a pro and a con. Because if you get it right every time, that's great, right? But when you get it wrong, then that will also be consistent. And another maybe con, I don't know if you can call it con, it does require a lot of technical and deep knowledge in order to build out and to maintain. And then to the last technology I want to highlight before handing it over to Heather is electronic invoicing or e-invoicing. And electronic invoicing is the more common technology that is being adopted by front runners and top companies. And when implemented in the right way, it can truly boost productivity and really help you to increase that level of straight-through processing with no touches that Bryan was talking about as well. That's ultimately where we want to be. You will see real-time tracking of invoices. You do have the ability to pre-validate information automatically before the invoices reaches your system. And this is also something that we're seeing being adopted by many countries around the world, and many governments are now dictating how an organization should be sending and receiving invoices. So they are implementing e-invoicing mandates. So it is important to have an e-invoicing strategy, both on the accounts payable side as well as on the accounts receivable side, in order to future-proof your business and help you to become and stay compliant with all of these different mandates that are being introduced. There are, of course, some cons as well. It does put a spotlight on broken or bad processes that you have within your organization, where while other technologies may more be treating the symptom, invoicing and implementing invoicing, it really forces you to look at the costs, and it may require that you do some changes within the processes that you have set up today. So an open mindset is important, as well as, I would say, a realistic mindset. E-invoicing is not a project, it is a process. So both AP and procurement should be fully on board in order for this to fully work and to reach the outcome that you're looking for. So with that said, I want to hand it over to Heather to tie everything together here. And yeah, take us home, Heather.
Hello, Heather. I think you're muted.
Apologies. Okay, let's try this again. So for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and recap some of the main points, highlight a couple of customer case studies, and then also look at how the journey to world-class may look for your organization, especially on the aspect of AP. So as we work with finance organizations around the globe, every organization has goals, objectives, and KPIs that they're tracking towards. Their objectives are first to look at cost savings and then to provide value back to the business. It's a financial journey for the organization, and it's really a question of, can they take it to the next level of becoming a world-class finance organization? So in the beginning, organizations are really focused on costs. So they're looking at the aspect of eliminating manual work, increasing those control points, reducing errors. Mid-journey, they're really focusing on increasing first-pass yield and straight-through processing, gaining that spend visibility, and having the availability to seize discounts. Lastly, we're looking at providing value back to the business. So we're looking at reduction of supplier queries and calls. We're also looking at improving supplier relationships, and at the end, true business agility. So first, I'll go ahead and look at an American multinational technology corporation that we worked with on the AP side. So their challenges included legacy non-standard practices, really regionalized processes, and they had quite a few unhappy suppliers. And they had suppliers really who couldn't conform to a prescribed document file format. So as far as for their goals were to standardize globally on their processes, pay suppliers on time, big factor, right, for having a happy supplier, and implement a supplier scorecard program. Their outcome was 36% reduction in invoice cycling time, 70% on-time payment, which is close to world-class, and then also increasing invoice compliance, especially with purchase order. Next, I'd like to highlight Shawcor, who is an energy and technology infrastructure leader. So as far as for Shawcor, they had quite a bit on their plate as far as for challenges, and they've made an amazing journey as far as on the migration path to a P2P top performer. So their challenges included a decentralized AP function, a costly labor-intensive OCR process for invoice ingestion, and a manual based process of adhering to regulatory requirements. Their goals were to centralize the AP function, migrate to a global ERP, and create a shared services organization. So they had a ton on their plate as far as part of their e-invoicing journey. Their outcomes that they've achieved today include 100% digitization of their invoices, 30% reduction in costs, and they created a preferred supplier program. As far as for that AP journey, as what Eric said before, e-invoicing is not a project, it's a process. And throughout that process, generally within the first phase of it, organizations are looking at digitalization, decreasing time and cost, as we said before, increasing visibility across their AP cycle, especially with those non-PO purchase orders, non-PO invoices. Those can be, obviously, gaining insight to that can be very hard without e-invoicing. Cash flow management, performance optimization, and always in the forefront for large global companies is global compliance, the legal and the business requirements. For a second phase, we're really focusing on as far as harmonization. So we're looking at efficiency improvements, increasing effectiveness, really looking at creating repeatable, scalable sub-processes and aligning across the organization. We're also looking for data to drive our decisions, which can be very hard with varied landscapes or the aspect of paper invoices sitting on suppliers' desks, and also increasing that supplier experience and relationship. And lastly, again, a common theme globally is compliance, especially with the mandates upcoming. And then phase 3, we look at the aspect of continuous improvement. We look at reassessing processes and future-proofing their solution. Throughout this phase, we're looking at those advanced refinements through the aspect of maybe validations and enrichments, which enable them to adjust their processes based on their current metrics and KPIs. The outcomes include where financial shared services becomes a partner to the business along with end-to-end process alignment. These phases can be parallel, they can be completed over time, it can be based on business drivers, could be M&A or the aspect of migrating to a global ERP. And then lastly, let's look at some final considerations. There's quite a few throughout the aspect of what kind of Bryan's talked about and Eric's brought to the table on the aspect of technology options for your organization. But I think a couple of them that I would highlight would be the aspect of, with the business case, being able to support all methods of P2P processes, communication, and document transactions, regardless of supplier capabilities. I think, there's a wide range of suppliers that you deal with, the large suppliers that are much easier to automate, and to the smaller suppliers who may, still be providing over here in the US, maybe a handwritten invoice. So looking at finding a solution that meets that criteria. Invoice compliance, I think, as we talk with organizations, do you want to increase your PO compliance? Are you struggling or striving to meet, say, 70, 80, 90% of PO compliance throughout your organization? I think, most organizations are looking to increase that or to begin to fully utilize purchase orders. And lastly, I think a big piece here with the upcoming mandates in 2024 and 2025 is regulatory compliance. E-invoicing mandates to date have really been focused on the AR function. But with the upcoming French and Polish mandates, it really brings AP and automation to the forefront. So I think that this will also drive as far as much more as far as looking at the business case for automating AP, especially now and in the future. And what I'd like to do is hand it back over to Susie for our last poll question.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Heather. So we'll move to questions and ask the final poll question, leave it open at the same time. So take your time answering this poll question. What would you like to do next? Would you like to schedule a discovery call with Eric and the Pagero team? Maybe book a demo with Pagero or sign up to Pagero's newsletter. I believe you can select all that apply. Right, I'll leave it open whilst we go through 2 questions. We've got a good number of questions that have come through here. First one, I believe, is to Bryan. It's business case related, Bryan. Just generally, what do you consider the guidance on ROI in terms of timing? Are you talking generally 18 months, 2 years? What's your experience and view there?
Well, everyone wants it as quickly as possible, but a reasonable return these days, especially with the SaaS and cloud-based tools, is going to be an 18 to 24 month return. It's what we're seeing, and it's also realistic in terms of the adoption. And some may be quicker, but I mean that's a safe target to put into your business case.
Okay, good. 18 to 24 months. Thank you. So I think this is a one that was raised more when Heather was talking about the business case for, is it Shawcor? And I think this particular viewer is asking about what was the percentage of zero touch on the invoice volume. I don't know if you've got that, Heather, but the figures that were being shared was 100% of the volume, 100% of the volume electronic, and 40% of vendors onboarded for electronic invoicing. Do you know kind of what the figures were looking like for touchless straight-through processing?
So I think right now to date, they're around 60, in between 60 and 70%. Now, obviously we have 40% of the vendors onboarded where they're submitting electronic invoices. And for the remainder, we have another solution as far as where we provide the invoice electronic. It's a managed OCR solution for them. So obviously that number will increase as we bring more vendors over to the electronic aspect.
Sure. Great. Now, a question here, which I know many of you will know the answer to, and some of you are still kind of figuring out, but what is considered electronic? So I think, Eric, I'll put that to you, just to really define what is electronic versus what is not considered electronic. Could you just put it in a nutshell for this particular viewer?
Absolutely. PDF is not an electronic file format. Let's just start there. An electronic invoice is to be sent in a structured file format that can be consumed by an ERP. So a PDF attached to an email is not considered as an electronic document, if you will. So it's a structured file format that can be consumed by an ERP. So an XML or an EDI type of format.
Okay, great. So a viewer here is saying, please share some experience on driving supplier adoption for e-invoicing. Heather or Eric, who'd like to take that one?
I think I can start. I think the most important thing is to provide options to your vendors, right? You can't just go out to your vendors and say, here's a portal, please use it, because they have hundreds and thousands of customers that are doing that. So I think it's very important to provide options, although the portal can be great, right? But you also need to work with the vendors and provide solutions that brings value to that vendor, whether that is connecting into their ERP, supporting their EDI strategy and their automation journey on the AR side, and also sort of showcase that you're not just focusing on the buyer, you're also focusing on the supplier and really trying to drive value to them and to their business processes. That's one thing that I would say is important to consider. I don't know, Heather, if you want to add anything to that.
I think the last thing I would add to that is to truly look at a service provider that really focuses on interoperability. If your supplier already has a service provider and can submit an electronic invoice through that existing service provider, the goal would be to not have them switch and to have them send that invoice through their existing provider. Less change management on their side. And obviously with that, there would be less portals for them to log into. So I think interoperability is a huge factor also with supplier adoption.
Great. So another question's come through. Does this EDI strategy allow to match multiple PO invoices? And EDI, I think, everyone knows that EDI can talk about being two things, right? It's a file format, but also it's sometimes we use it to refer to point-to-point electronic invoicing, which is not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about a network that can actually accommodate the EDI file format, but it's what we're talking about with Pagero and a network e-invoicing. It's very much a network platform. With that in mind, then I'll put this question to you, Eric, or you, Heather. Does this EDI strategy, so let's just talk about it being electronic invoicing network strategy and not point to point, allow to match multiple PO invoices?
Do you want to cover that, Heather, with the matching process and where the matching takes place?
Right. The goal is obviously to look at the aspect of a pre-delivery match process prior to the invoice going into the ERP. Obviously, that allows for better success for match rates, and to try to couple that as much with your current ERP process as to, are we looking for a PO line number first, a part number, descriptions, what is my tolerance for unit price as far as for determining the PO line number. So yes, the aspect of best practice would be obviously to look at having a pre-match validation occur as far as prior to delivery of that invoice to your ERP.
Okay, good. All right, good. We had some good technical questions there, so thank you for answering those, Pagero. And to Eric and to Bryan, Heather, thanks so much for your information today, your presentation, thoroughly enjoyable, and I'm sure very well received by our viewers. So thank you everyone for your time and attention today, and we look forward to welcoming you next time. Thanks and goodbye.